Ashwood was a city that time forgot, a sprawl of rusted factories and sagging rowhouses hunched under a sky perpetually stained grey. Winter arrived in late November like a vengeful ghost, its icy fingers clawing through cracked windows and thin coats, reminding us all how little we mattered. I was 24 that year, Jake Carver, a wiry kid with calloused hands and a chip on my shoulder bigger than the abandoned steel mill on Route 9. I'd been hustling since I was 14, flipping burgers at greasy diners, mopping floors in dive bars, answering phones for screaming customers who thought I'd personally ruined their lives. Minimum wage was my ceiling, and in Ashwood, where 40% of us were unemployed, even that was a lifeline. My buddy Mike, a genius with a PhD in theoretical physics, had spent 2 years slinging fries at Burger Bonanza before clawing his way back to academia. Me? I had no fancy degree, just a stubborn streak and a hunger to prove I wasn't doomed to rot in this town. So when I landed a job at Megamart, the retail colossus that had devoured Ashwood's small businesses like a plague of locusts, I saw it as my shot. Overnight stocker, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., $12 an hour. No glamour, no daylight, just a cavernous warehouse of fluorescent lights and endless aisles. But the benefits package dangled like a golden carrot: health insurance, a 401k, and whispers of career advancement. I'd heard tales of lifers who started on the floor and ended up in cushy offices, sipping coffee instead of breaking their backs. That was my plan: work hard, climb out, build something real. I wasn't naive enough to think it'd be easy, but I figured I could outlast the grind. The Megamart on Route 17 was a beast, a sprawling concrete box that hummed with the buzz of flickering lights and the clatter of shopping carts. My first night, I met the crew. Tara Jennings was a single mom in her 30s, with tired eyes and a sharp tongue that could cut glass. She'd been at Megamart 3 years, supporting her 6-year-old daughter, MIA, on wages that barely covered rent. Luis Navarro was 19, wiry and restless, dreaming of opening a garage while he hauled boxes with a quiet intensity. Big Dan Kowalski was the veteran, a gentle giant in his 40s, 15 years on the job, still humming old rock tunes through the chaos. Then there was Rick Hensley, the overnight manager. A balding, smirking relic in his late 40s, he wore a cheap tie like a badge of honor and carried himself like he owned us. "Keep those shelves full, Carver," he'd bark, barely glancing up from his phone as he lounged in his office. "You're not here to slack." I didn't slack. I threw myself into it, hauling pallets stacked with 50-pound bags of dog food, wrestling with tangled shrink wrap, dodging rickety ladders that wobbled under my weight. The work was brutal: cases of canned goods that left my arms screaming, floors slick with spilled bleach I'd mop up without a word, shelves that needed restocking faster than we could move. I took the shifts no one wanted: Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, the dead of night hours when the store was a ghost town but the trucks kept coming. If a task needed doing and no one knew how, I'd step up. Paint machine jammed? I'd come in on my day off, unpaid, to learn how to fix it. Inventory system crashed. I'd stay late, poring over manuals until it hummed again. I wasn't just a warm body, I was indispensable. And it paid off. 10 months in, Linda Voss, the store manager, called me into her office. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, hair pulled back tight, voice like gravel from years of chain smoking. Her office smelled of stale coffee and paperwork, a cluttered cave of files and motivational posters curling at the edges. "You've got grit, Jake," she said, sliding a form across her desk. "Low-level management, starting January 1st, $18 an hour, benefits, a real future. Don't blow it." I grinned, the first real hope I'd felt in years sparking in my chest. I signed the offer, shook her calloused hand, and walked out dreaming of a life where I didn't count pennies for rent or pray my ancient Honda wouldn't die on the highway. January 1st was 6 weeks away, just a sprint to the finish line. But Rick had other plans. The trouble started the weekend before Thanksgiving, when the holiday rush turned Megamart into a battlefield. Shoppers swarmed the aisles like locusts, snatching turkeys, canned cranberries, and cheap toys, leaving empty shelves and crumpled boxes in their wake. The air stank of desperation and stale perfume, the PA system crackling with looped carols that grated on our nerves. Rick, obsessed with his year-end bonus, a rumored $73,000 that year, decided to game the system. He slashed our staffing, cutting the overnight crew from 10 to 5. 5 people to unload trucks groaning with pallets, stock a store the size of a football field, and clean up before dawn. 6 hours to do 13 hours of work. It was impossible, and he knew it. The first night it happened, I cornered him in his office. The room was a shrine to his ego, photos of him shaking hands with district managers, a shiny new desk he'd bragged about earning with last year's bonus, a chipped mug that read, "World's Best Boss," in ironic red letters. "Rick, we're drowning out there," I said, my voice tight. "Where's the rest of the crew?" He leaned back in his chair, smirking, his watery blue eyes glinting under the fluorescence. "Budget's tight, Carver. You'll manage. Or do I need to write you up for whining?" Write-ups were his weapon of choice, 2 in 13 months, and you were out. Upper management rubber-stamped them without a glance, no appeals, no mercy. So we stayed silent, pushing through exhaustion, skipping breaks, eating granola bars on the fly instead of taking lunches. Tara's hands shook as she hauled boxes, muttering about MIA waiting at home. Louis cursed under his breath, his dreams of a garage fading with every unpaid hour. Big Dan just hummed louder, a shield against the madness. Me? I seethed, but I kept moving. That promotion was my lifeline. Rick wasn't done twisting the knife. Overtime was the real trap. Staying late was the only way to finish, but approving it cut into his bonus. So he'd log our extra hours as unapproved, forcing us to offset them by cutting regular shifts later in the week. Except he never approved those cuts either. Every Monday, he'd saunter into the break room, reeking of cheap cologne and stale coffee, waving a stack of write-ups like a king dispensing pardons. "Gotta follow policy," he'd say, grinning like a shark as he handed us forms for unapproved overtime. We'd sign, heads bowed, while he basked in praise from the district manager for efficiency. Our sweat, our tears, his reward. Tara cracked first. One night, as we wrestled with a pallet of frozen turkeys that had tipped over in the loading dock, she sank to the floor, eyes red. "I've got MIA at home, Jake," she whispered, voice breaking. "I can't keep doing 14-hour shifts for nothing. She's asking why I'm never there." I squeezed her shoulder, helpless. "We'll figure it out," I lied. Louis just shrugged, too tired to fight, his hands raw from gripping splintered crates. Big Dan took it in stride, humming "Sweet Home Alabama" while he hauled boxes twice his size. Me? I kept my head down, dodging write-ups like landmines. Those overtime dings were minor, slaps on the wrist, but they blocked promotions for 3 months. I could wait it out. January 1st was close. Or so I thought. The week before Christmas, it all unraveled. Snow blanketed Ashwood, turning the parking lot into a slushy nightmare. I pulled a double shift, 16 hours straight, my hands chapped and bleeding from wrestling frozen pallets in the unheated dock. My boots were soaked, my back screamed, but I kept going. At 3 a.m., Rick sauntered over, write-up in hand. "Overtime again, Carver. Sign here." I was too tired to argue, scrawling my name as Linda appeared in the doorway, her face grim under the flickering lights. "One more of these, Jake, and you're suspended," she said, her tone flat. Overtime abuse. Company rules. I gaped at her, exhaustion giving way to fury. Suspended? I'm staying because he won't staff us right. Take it up with Rick, she replied, already turning away. I don't make the policies. Fury simmered, a molten tide I could barely contain. The next night, when Rick ordered me to stay till 6 a.m., I planted my feet on the cold concrete floor. Not without an overtime form. His eyes narrowed, the smirk faltering. "What did you say?" "You heard me. Sign it, or I'm out at 3. He didn't sign. Instead, he scribbled a write-up on the spot, this time for abusive actions toward management. It wasn't a slap on the wrist, it was a kill shot. The next day, Linda called me into her office. The air was thick with tension, the hum of the heater barely cutting through the chill. "Promotion's gone," she said, sliding an acknowledgement form across her desk. Sign this. I read it, and my world tilted. Not only was the promotion dead, but I couldn't apply for management again for 5 years. 6 years total, 6 years of minimum wage, 6 years of breaking my back for nothing, all because I dared to stand up. Rage erupted, white-hot and unstoppable. Rick had left me alone in his office to sign, his gleaming new desk mocking me under the fluorescence. I grabbed a Sharpie from his chipped mug, scrawled, FOFF, across the wood in letters a foot high, the marker's acrid scent filling my nose. The desk squeaked under the pressure, a satisfying crack splitting the silence. I stormed out, my pulse pounding in my ears. In the hall, I ripped off my Megamart vest and name tag, shredded the write-ups into confetti, and flung them into the air. Rick stood frozen, his smirk gone, his watery eyes wide. "You're done, Hensley," I snarled, leaning in close enough to smell his fear. "I'm getting you fired." Then I walked into the snow, the icy wind biting my face, jobless and broke, but alive with purpose. He chased me to the lot, his voice cracking over the crunch of snow under my boots. "Wait, Jake. I'll talk to the GM, cut it to 3 years. Overtime's approved, rest of the season. Hell, I'll give you a slice of my bonus." I didn't turn back. His desperation was music, a high-pitched wail against the howling wind, but I was too far gone. I didn't care if I starved, if my apartment's heat got cut off, if I ended up sleeping in my rusting Honda. I'd never wear that vest again. Back home, in my cramped one-room apartment with peeling paint and a radiator that wheezed like a dying man, I sat at my ancient laptop and hatched a plan. I'd always carried a voice recorder at work, an ADA accommodation for memory issues from a car accident at 19 that had left me with a scar on my temple and a brain that sometimes forgot details under stress. Legal, documented, approved by HR. After that first overtime write-up, I'd started recording Rick's rants, every threat, every order to stay late, every smug refusal to approve hours. I'd never used them, too scared of retaliation, but I'd kept them. 18 hours of audio, a gold mine of his corruption, stored on a battered thumb drive I kept in a sock drawer. I spent the night uploading it, the laptop's fan whirring as I organized files by date, labeling each clip, Rick threatens Tara, 11/20, Rick denies OT approval, 12/3, Rick brags about bonus, 12/10. My hands shook, not from cold, but from adrenaline, as I drafted an email, Rick Hensley's bonus scheme. I CC'd every store manager, district supervisor, and compliance officer in Megamart's Midwest region, dozens of names pulled from an old employee directory I'd swiped months back. I attached the audio, hit send, and collapsed onto my lumpy mattress, the radiator's clanks lulling me into a restless sleep. 5 days later, I trudged through the snow to pick up my final paycheck. The parking lot was a mess of slush and tire tracks, the store buzzing with a strange energy. Whispers followed me as I walked in, cashiers glancing my way, stockers pausing mid-task. Rick was gone, fired after a midnight raid by corporate. Security had marched him out, his precious desk still bearing my Sharpie mark, his bonus evaporated. The story had spread like wildfire, the audio had hit the home office like a bomb, exposing his scheme in excruciating detail. Tara met me in the break room, a rare smile cracking her tired face. "You're a legend, Jake," she laughed, pouring me a cup of burnt coffee. "They're still talking about that desk. Nobody'll touch it." Linda cornered me next, her gravelly voice softer than usual. "We sorted it. Promotion's back on the table." I shook my head, the coffee bitter on my tongue. Then came Regional Director Carla Reese, a sleek woman in a power suit, her heels clicking on the tile. She'd flown in from Chicago, her presence a rare event that sent the staff scrambling. "Rick's job's open," she said, smirking. $73,000 hiring bonus, funny how that worked out. "Take it." I laughed, a harsh bark that echoed in the room. "Not a chance. I'm done with retail." "Everyone comes back," she said, unfazed, her dark eyes glinting. "When you do, I'll find you a spot." I didn't. For 5 months, I scraped by, couch surfing at my mom's tiny duplex, dodging eviction notices from my landlord, eating ramen and pride. Ashwood's job market was a wasteland, and my savings dwindled to a handful of crumpled bills. Mom, a retired nurse with arthritis and a fierce love, didn't push me. "You did right, Jake," she'd say, stirring a pot of watery soup. That bastard had it coming. But the weight of unemployment gnawed at me, a constant itch I couldn't scratch. I refused to crawl back to Megamart, though, pride or spite, I wasn't sure which. Then, a lifeline, a prison guard gig in neighboring Ohio. I'd applied on a whim, half expecting rejection, but the call came, a gruff voice offering $20 an hour, full benefits, training included. I packed my duffel, clothes, my laptop, that battered thumb drive, and left Ashwood's grey skyline behind, the Honda sputtering across state lines. The prison was in a quiet town called Millfield, a stark contrast to Ashwood's decay, rolling hills, clapboard houses, a sky that actually showed stars. I rented a one-bedroom above a hardware store, bought a used pickup with my first paycheck, and started over. The work was tough, 12-hour shifts patrolling concrete halls, breaking up fights, keeping the peace among men who'd lost everything. But it was honest, and the weight of Megamart's fluorescent oppression lifted. Nights off, I'd sit on my sagging porch with a beer, watching those stars, and think about Rick. Word trickled back through Tara, he'd landed at a gas station on Ashwood's outskirts, pumping fuel and chasing bonuses he'd never catch. Karma had a way of settling scores, and I tipped the scales. The prison gig settled into a rhythm. I learned the ropes, how to spot a brewing fight, how to talk down a guy twice my size, how to stay calm when chaos erupted. My supervisor, a grizzled vet named Hank, took me under his wing. "You've got a spine, Carver," he'd say, clapping my shoulder. That's rare. I earned respect, not just from Hank but from the inmates too, firm but fair, a reputation that kept me safe. The paychecks piled up, enough to fix the pickup's rattling engine and buy Mom a new coat for Christmas. She cried when I handed it to her, a rare crack in her tough exterior. Tara called 6 months after I'd left Megamart, her voice bright over the crackling line. "Jake, you're still a legend. They've got Rick's desk in storage, nobody'll touch it with that graffiti. It's like a trophy." She'd quit too, found work at a daycare where MIA could tag along. Lewis opened his garage, a small shop on Ashwood's east side, his hands finally free of Megamart's grime. Big Dan stayed on, humming through the chaos, a fixture as steady as the store itself. Megamart limped along, its overnight crew bolstered by new hires and stricter oversight from corporate, rattled by the scandal I'd unleashed. Years later, at 30, I was a shift supervisor at Millfield Correctional, training rookies and running my block with a quiet authority. Mike visited once, now a dean at a university upstate, marveling at my path over beers at a local dive. "You're a survivor, Jake," he said, his glasses fogging in the humid bar air. I shrugged. Survivors don't just endure, they fight. And I fought, not just for me, but for Tara, Lewis, Dan, everyone Rick had crushed under his cheap tie and smug grin. That was enough. One spring evening, as I locked up my block and stepped into the cool Millfield dusk, my phone buzzed. An unknown number, a Chicago area code. I answered, cautious. "Jake Carver?" A woman's voice, smooth and familiar. "Carla Reese." "Yeah," I said, leaning against my truck. "Who's this?" "Carla. Megamart. Been a while." I snorted. "Told you I wasn't coming back." She laughed, a low, knowing sound. "Heard you're doing well. Prison guard, huh? Still got that spine. Listen, we're opening a distribution center near Millfield. Management spot's yours if you want it. 6 figures, full package." I paused, the offer hanging in the air like smoke. 6 figures, more than I'd ever dreamed in Ashwood. But I saw Rick's smirk, felt the weight of that vest, heard Tara's exhausted whispers. "Thanks," I said finally. "But I'm good here." "Suit yourself," she replied, unfazed. "Doors open if you change your mind." I hung up, slid into my truck, and drove home under a sky streaked with pink and gold. Megamart was a ghost, a chapter closed. I built something better, not just a job, but a life. Rick's gas station pumps rusted in Ashwood, and I smiled, knowing I'd won.